So the first Armenian house I walk into, I remember walking into it and just, my eyes were huge. There's like no wallpaper, and if it is, it's just kind of worn. There's exposed wires everywhere. They usually live in these tall concrete buildings called shanks that are apartment buildings, and you just walk into them, and they love rugs. Rugs are everywhere. They're used as mouse pads. They're put on like the cushions of the couch. They're on the walls, just everywhere. And I just remember walking in just thinking, holy rug. There's rugs everywhere. And I had murabai, which is their jam, and they made me tea, and I had never had tea before. So I looked at my companion like, is this okay? And she's like, yeah, this is totally fine. And I had figs for the first time in my life. And I got a picture of me with my first cup of tea. And it was a huge cultural shock.
Armenia has such a special culture. It's really a uniquely placed nation because it's a Christian nation, but for all intents and purposes, it's on the border of the Middle East. So its history has been rife with being conquered by Islamic nations, Turkey, Iran, and so they've had a lot of struggles with that. But they've always tried to maintain that Christian culture since they converted in 309, and they were actually the first nation that officially accepted Christianity. And it's this very special part of their culture where Christianity is a huge part of their identity. So a lot of times we'll be talking to people and be like, hey, we're messengers for the Lord Jesus Christ, and we have a message. Would that be something that you would be interested in hearing? And they'd be like, well, of course, I'm Armenian. I love Jesus. And just because that's a huge part of their identity. And that was a huge blessing of being able to talk with people. And it didn't matter really who it was, that most people you could talk to about God and about faith and about what Jesus Christ meant, and they had a basis to understand. And so I loved that. I love that integration into their culture that their religion had. As part of their religion, they go and practice by going to a church, and they'll light a candle to say a prayer. And to some people on the outside viewing it might seem that doesn't seem like the best way to worship, but I could see how sincere they were in it and how much faith they would exert in it. And so they were always trying to go and maintain that connection with God. One of the interesting cultural things that I liked was just how important to them their families were. And it's a little different than here in the United States. Here, when you get older as a member of your family, you eventually get married and move out and go start your own. And in a way they do that as well. But there's a lot more extended family living together. For instance, the firstborn son, he doesn't move out. He goes and gets married, brings his wife home, and then he inherits the house as his parents get older. And that kind of takes care of him and his family and also his parents, so that in Armenia they take care of each other. They take care of their family members in need. So obviously there are cases when there's older people living by themselves, but for a large part of it, their parents are living with them, they're taking care of them, and they just have a huge support unit for their family. And that was one of the great things about teaching in Armenia, is that when we could start to teach families, like, it had such a huge blessing for all of their family members. And when we talked about families being together forever, that really resonated with a lot of people, and that helped them to make it to the temple. Some do's and don'ts. This is because Armenia is kind of on the cusp of the Middle East. There's some Middle Eastern traditions that have kind of creeped in. For instance, in the Middle East, anything relating to your shoes are offensive. And so Armenians have this also a similar belief that the sole of your foot is offensive. So it's offensive to sit with your legs crossed and to show the bottom of your feet. So that's something you just have to be conscious of. It's not, I guess, necessarily a super big deal, but it is something that's there. And what other do's and don'ts? For our missionaries, an interesting cultural thing is just since when the Soviet Union fell, there were a lot of religions that went in, not just the LDS faith. A lot of those faiths proselyted by knocking on doors, despite there being a law in Armenia that makes it illegal to openly proselyte. A lot of religions have kind of just ignored that law because it's not strongly enforced, but the Armenian people themselves remember it. And so it offends them when people knock on their doors, in the sense that it's more of an annoyance to them. And so that wasn't something we did. We mainly contacted people by walking in the street and talking to them, but I never knocked any doors on my mission. So it was an interesting fact.